A lot of discussion in the courtroom today over police body cameras and their use following the shooting of Justine Ruszczyk. And a lot of testimony about Mohamed Noor's performance as a police officer came into play, to the surprise of prosecutors. Lou Raguse was in the courtroom and is live with what we learned from day 4 of testimony. Lou?
Julie, what happened is one of the prosecution's witnesses became beneficial to the defense. That witness was Lieutenant Dan May, Mohamed Noor's commanding officer at the time of the shooting. In cross-examination, the defense asked Lieutenant May a lot about ambushes, which Noor's attorney claims he thought was happening to him. May said that they talked about it a lot at roll call, warning officers after various times that it happened around the country. And May said he also told them that it's happened to Minneapolis police before and could happen again. Earlier, about Noor and his partner Matthew Harity, Lieutenant May said he, quote, trusted their judgment. When officers Mohamed Noor and Matthew Harity's relative lack of experience was revealed following the shooting, some wondered why two young officers would be partnered together. Their supervisor, Lieutenant Dan May, testified that he trusted their judgment. Younger officers work in similar fashion, May said, adding that they're generally more active and more productive than older officers. He liked to pair officers of similar work styles. That testimony came in cross-examination by Noor's attorneys, clearly attempting to convey to the jury that Noor's supervisors trusted him and his decision-making. Earlier in the morning, more body cameras from Minneapolis police officers were shown to the jury, revealing more about the aftermath of the shooting. Officers in the second squad to respond asked Noor and Harity, who were surrounding Justine Ruszczyk Damon on the ground, is there anyone else we should be looking for at all? And Harity responds on the video, no, 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 officer shot. And we learned while the jury was out of the courtroom that prosecutors allowed a lot of what they considered to be character evidence about Mohamed Noor to be used without them objecting, because they want to talk about his character as well. Specifically, they want to introduce that video of a traffic stop that shows Officer Noor appearing to point a gun at the driver's head. The judge said they can't introduce that video yet, but she could reconsider if the defense continues down this path. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Lou. You can follow any updates from the Noor trial on KARE11.com and our social media pages.